Idea. We are featuring MSU student researchers who are doing projects in labs and in groups here on campus. For this 5 minutes, you only get 20 slides and they auto advance every 15 seconds. Has anybody ever given a presentation with forced auto advance? Only a few hands. Okay. It's hard. Ignite overall started in San Francisco in 2006, and since then it has been in over 350 cities across 6 continents, and we're the only one that's currently in Michigan. So for Ignite Talks at MSU, we had an open call for students doing research in a project in any field. We have our current open call open now for Ignite number 4, which will happen in February. So if you like what you see tonight, or if you think you can challenge them, please submit your research to give us a talk next semester. Previous public speaking or stage experience is not required as part of this because we have a research communication workshop that we go through with the students. And we selected 10 students for this one, and we're really excited for you to hear from them. So, that's fun. For this evening, we will start off with 5 talks. We will then have an intermission with some music from Impact 89 FM, and then we'll have 5 more talks after the intermission. We've got some food and drink in the back, so during the intermission, please help yourself, but we ask that you stay seated during the talks out of respect for the speakers. And I am very pleased to introduce my colleague, Natasha Miller, who is a world-famous poet and the Community Engagement Manager here at the MSU Museum, to MC this evening.
Please give it up for Abby Stevens again. Don't pay attention to the slides right now because I'm not using them, so give it up for Abby. I am only a world famous poet depending on how big your world is. So, and MSU Museum is my world. So I guess I do poetry a little bit. Give it up for yourselves for being here. I am from the world of poetry slam, so we like a lot of energy while artists are like not necessarily performing, but while they're presenting. So make them feel good. Some of you all are cousins, family members, girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever it is, from people that probably shouldn't be here, 4 people, but you're here. So give it up for yourselves for supporting these people. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the credit union right downstairs. So give it up for MSU, FCU, like make noise. I mean, they probably denied all of us a loan, right? But like, we're still here. So he's like, I denied your loan. Like, okay, I'll talk to you after. So are you guys ready for a good show of presentations? These researchers are here not because it's Halloween and they're pretending to do research. They're actually like amazing researchers that will contribute to the value of the world one day. And I'm very excited to be here with them. And give it up for the MSU Museum for putting this on as well, please. All right, so if you're ready for your first researcher, say yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think they need a better yeah. If you're ready for the first researcher, say yeah. Yeah. So everybody make noise as Michelle Kim gets to the stage.
Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm here today to persuade you that it is a good idea to teach stereotypes to language models, specifically ChatGPT, so good that it will make it less biased. Let me begin with an example. Let's say you have an assignment from a writing class. You have to write about yourself and your culture. So as every hardworking, diligent student would, I open up ChatGPT and type, write an essay about an Asian American woman. ChatGPT replies, sure, here's an essay. And then I get this essay that describes an Asian woman as submissive and exotic, yet horrible at driving. I'm appalled. I just want ChatGPT to write me a perfect essay so that I can pass the course, not personally attack me. Did you ever have an encounter with someone who confidently spits out biases and stereotypes about you? Now imagine that person is ChatGPT who talks to millions of people every day. This is an example of AI bias. It's when an AI system like ChatGPT produces biased results that reflect and perpetuate human biases. There are different kinds of AI systems, but for today's talk, I will focus on bias in language models. So what are language models? ChatGPT is one example, and there are many more, like Gemini from Google, Meta AI from Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, and Claude from Anthropic. Formally, a language model is a statistical model that learns the probability distribution of words. That is, a model knows English well enough that when asked which word completes the sentence better safe than, then it will reply, it is highly likely that the word sorry is the correct one. Language models can do a wide variety of tasks, from translating languages, classifying reviews as positive or negative, auto-completing a sentence, and replying to customers as a chatbot. Language models can do these things because they learn language by reading a lot of text, which are called the training data. The training data is usually collected from online. And as we all know, people don't always write polite and nice stuff online. Have you ever read a hateful comment from a Facebook or Twitter? Now imagine that comment is given to the language model and the model learns to speak that way. This is bias coming from the training data. Another example is the problem of underrepresentation. Language models typically perform much better in English than in other low-resource languages such as Sangha, a language spoken in South Africa. So why does it matter that these language models have biases? Well, they can have real-world implications and harms. When people naively apply these models to solve their problems or tests, these models learn these biases and give results that perpetuate those biases. Now, what can we do about this problem? The initial approach engineers took was, let's remove bias. Okay, sounds reasonable. Bias is giving us a problem, let's get rid of it. However, there are some disadvantages to this approach. First, it is at odds to the way us humans approach bias. How can we remove biases and stereotypes without first identifying and understanding the biases that exist in the training data and in the model? Second, when we remove bias from these models, we lose access to the bias information. It is valuable information that teaches us how these language models encode biases in the training data. Based on these observations, I propose that we teach stereotypes to language models before removing them. Together with my co-author Jong-Wan Kim and my advisor Kristen Johnson, we proposed this idea at a conference this summer. What we did was, to teach stereotype, we adopted a social psychology theory called the ABC theory. A stereotype is measured based on the agency and beliefs. Having high agency means a group is perceived to be successful and competent. Beliefs measure the level of beliefs in religion or politics. So we curated a data set with stereotype scores, specifically agency and belief scores, give it to a language model learns from it, and voila, we have a model who knows how to score stereotypes. Our model was not only able to score stereotypes well, but it was able to detect hateful comment and predict toxic content. By showing that our model performs well in stereotype-related tests, we show that teaching stereotypes is helpful. We use AI every day. It makes our life easy. Such advancement was made possible because we've been focusing on technical improvements. However, it is time for us to move beyond just does it work to does it perform fairly. Thank you.
Make more noise for that researcher. My colleagues like to stick to a very strict time frame, which is interesting because they hire me to do this every year and I never do. So what is the wildest thing that's happened with you in like ChatGPT or AI? Nothing wild, it's all been good? Okay, for myself, I was doing a show like a week ago and it had like the senator, the mayor, everybody there. And I had to write a poem the night before. And then I just played around with ChatGPT, like what would a poem sound like in like my voice? And it actually wrote like a decent poem to the point where I was like, that says a lot about me. I was like, I should perform this poem tomorrow, but also I probably wouldn't get paid, so I didn't. Give it up for that researcher again. And everybody make noise as Nadine Shetiah makes their way to the stage.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nadine Shetiah, and I am a third-year undergraduate student here at MSU's Lyman Briggs College. Today, I'm going to be talking about autism and employment. Spoiler alert, it's not always about autism. So first, let's talk a little bit about our research project. It's a mixed method study called Meanings of Autism, Meanings of Work. We did photo elicitation, interviews, and job shadowing with autistic individuals working or seeking work and helpers. In the study, we asked participants how they prefer to refer to their autism. Autistic individuals are often praised for their attention to detail and their creative focus. However, the research is clear. They face much higher rates of unemployment. And so when we asked autistic individuals how they prefer to refer to their autism, as you can see, almost half preferred identity first language, so referring to them as autistic people. So that's what I'll be doing today. As my fellow research assistant, Jacob Crable, defines neurodiversity in terms of autism, it's that autism is simply a different way of being in the world, not necessarily a wrong or bad way. And this perspective allows us to see that autism is a difference, not a deficit. It's not something that needs to be fixed, rather it's something that we can embrace and hone in on to get unique perspectives in all environments, not only a workplace environment. So when we look at workplace environments, we can see that a lot of the times the things that autistic individuals experience is not from skills or abilities. Rather, it's things that the barriers come from. So something that was very important that we should highlight is that yes, there are differences between autistic individuals and neurotypical individuals, but there are also similarities. And this was a common theme that we should highlight throughout this. If you've met one autistic person, you've only met one autistic person. And I think this is a really incredible quote as it highlights that the unique and incredible diversity within the autistic community. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. And so the barriers that are experienced by autistic individuals are also barriers that are experienced by neurotypical people. And a lot of times they arise from environments that were not made for neurodivergent individuals. And so let's focus in on that. Here's a list of things that participants attributed to making work harder. This is not an extensive list, but today we're going to focus on the top 3. Let's start with sensory issues. Sensory overload is when the brain is overwhelmed by excessive sensory input. So this can be loud noises, bright lights, or strong smells. These are all things that are not that uncommon and that you can find very easily in a workplace environment. The next thing we're going to talk about is masking. This is something that autistic individuals will engage in an effort to hide their autistic traits to try to fit in with their neurotypical coworkers. And as you can imagine, this can be quite overwhelming and exhausting, and it can lead to burnout, a state of deep exhaustion where one feels physically and emotionally drained. And a constant state of burnout can affect overall mental well-being, let alone workplace performance and efficiency. But on the other hand, there were things that participants attributed to making work easier, like informal strategies, formal accommodations, and workplace diversity. Again, this is not an extensive list, but these were the things that were highlighted. A recent study showed that companies that hire autistic employees saw, on average, 28% higher revenue, double the net income, and 30% higher profit margins than companies that didn't have autistic employees. And so when we talk about inclusive practice, for example, communication, clear communication versus vague communication in the workplace can be helpful for everyone, not just neurodivergent employees. And so this can increase workplace efficiency as well. So when we look at these practices, it's important to note that inclusivity in the workplace means working together across all differences, not just autistic or not. And so this can help us find the difference that we can make, and it's clear. By fostering diverse and inclusive and supportive environments, we can help break down the barriers that hold so many people back from reaching their potential. Thank you so much for coming and listening to this presentation.
I love how it seemed like they were nervous, but still had a lot of time to spare to give y'all a thank you. So give it up for that. Like, I got it going. It is very hard to get on stage in front of people and perform, but especially present research. So again, give it up for all of the researchers here explaining their work to you. So our very next researcher to come to the stage actually sits on our student advisory committee at the MSU Museum. I'm not saying that to give him a one-up, because there is no one-up. Everybody is winners here. So give it up for all the winners, but him especially. No, I'm joking. So make noise as Enrique Núñez Mussa makes his way to the stage. Give it up, give it up, give it up.
Good night, everyone. My name is Enrique Núñez Mussa, and I am a PhD candidate in information and media, and I specialize in journalism, how journalists create knowledge. And today, I want to talk about one of the most relevant questions in human experience. Why? This is the question that creates sense-making. Why this group of people voted for this candidate or the other? Why are we seeing these effects in nature? And of course, scientists, social scientists have the tools to answer it. But journalists have to deal with this question daily. And they don't have the same tools, they don't have the same timing, but at the same time, is one of the most relevant questions to answer. But the challenges are huge, because life is messy and complicated. News are being updated constantly. We have this version of a story, and a couple of minutes later, there's this other version. Sources contradict each other. And journalists have to rely on experts, but also they have to choose them. But anyway, I think it's the most relevant question to answer. And I am going to push this argument with the story of a cow. Yes, a famous cow. But for this, I invite you to travel in time with me. Ooh, I'm very sorry for the cheap special effect, probably not the best way to use my 15 seconds here, but just follow along. Right now, we are going to Chicago. Yes, quite near, 1871. And a devastating event has happened, the Great Chicago Fire. It was terrible. It started in a barn in the southern part of the city center, in the barn of the O'Leary family, an immigrant Irish family. And it moved through the wind to the north, taking most of the commercial and business area, impacting the people working and living there. The consequences were terrible. People had to relocate. They slept in church for several days as shelters. They need to keep their belongings. And every time human beings experience this type of situations, of course, there is a natural question. Why is this happening? And the press had an answer. They decided to blame Miss O'Leary's cow, the most wanted cow in the United States. And the news of the cow kicking a kerosene lamp and creating the fire expanded through the whole country, because newspapers were not that different to social media. They were aggregators. They would take one snippet of information from one city to the other without verifying it, and they would just paste it next to the other one. And in some cities, the editors would get creative, and they would add some details to these stories that would resonate with their communities. So communities that didn't like immigrants, well, you would have a version of Miss O'Leary depicted as a witch. Not that different to social media today either. And in that context, and all these different versions circulated, the story got embedded in culture. There's a movie, there's a Beach Boys song, and there's even a nursery rhyme.
Mrs. O'Leary hung a lantern in the shed, and when the cow kicked over, she winked her eye and said, "It'll be a hot time in the old town tonight. Fire, fire, fire."
But it's actually more a pants on fire than an actual fire, because this story is completely fake. The journalist that created the story recognized even the same year that the story was fabricated. And it's been debunked again, again, and again, even more than 100 years later. Once you're in a nursery rhyme, you're in the heads of generations and generations of children as the official story, like fire, fire, fire. After that, there's nothing else you can do. So what is the lesson for journalism here? Although today we have different versions of stories circulating in social media, that's ephemeral. But journalism has a responsibility in collective memory because it's the version that stays. And also, the explanations that journalists are providing and the meaning of these explanations are the ones that matter the most, because many times that's the primary source. So that is where my research is heading right now, looking at what are the meanings and the explanations that are resonating today with the people. Because finally, it's the answer to a why question, what will make someone decide to use a face mask or not when we're facing a global pandemic, or even to vaccinate.
Actually, that's my song. And news can be real depending on where you get it from. I do appreciate the slides because it was more like Halloween, Tim Burton-ish. So like, happy Halloween if you celebrate it. Are you all ready for your next researcher? Please make a lot of noise as Destiny Canning comes to the stage.
Thank you. All right. All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Destiny. I'm a senior here at MSU, but I'm also a paramedic at two of our local emergency departments. And we are studying the overutilization of emergency services. Why are ERs being so crowded, and how can, oh, we're on the last slide for some reason. No worries. My intro is going to be extra long now. I don't know how I'm going to top the cow in the last one, I'm going to be honest. No, that's all right. All right. So, in the United States, every year there are millions of kids that come to the ER for things like upper respiratory concerns, fevers, coughs, and a lot of new parents. And that mostly is due to a lack of education. Emergency rooms are being really overwhelmed by this type of overutilization, and I can speak from a personal perspective on this as well. But not only is it burdening our staff and our resources, but also the patient's resources as well, both financially and time-wise. One thing that I really want to highlight is that it's not just the cost that we're looking at. We're also worried about the time that we're kind of inputting into each of these overutilizing patients. The money, it's skyrocketing the cost of the emergency department visits, and we're wasting a lot of those resources. So the big takeaway is that we have the resources in the Michigan community, and specifically here in District 1 and in District 5 in Grand Rapids, but we're not educating families on those resources that we have available, which is why they're being underutilized and we're being overutilized. Policymakers also tend to forget that insurance plays a really big role in this overutilization. People come to the ER expecting it to be more efficient, more affordable, when in reality that is just not what it is, unfortunately. They get hit with a big old copay. But we believe that by teaching families about the proper care options that they have, navigating into them to the right option, and then also educating them on the symptoms that their children are having, we can prevent those overuse of ER visits. In Michigan, over the course of 2 years, we surveyed over 2,000 families that saw the ER, and we noticed that there are over 300 cases of overutilization every single month, and that is a lot. On top of that, 80% of those patients and their families admitted that they didn't even know they were coming to the ER for something that's not emergent, which shows to me that it's really that lack of awareness that's driving this overutilization. We have the resources in our community. They just don't know about them. Some of the most common reasons, as we expected, were coughs, fevers, minor injuries, and these are all things that can be handled outside of an emergency department environment. On top of that, people tend to forget that college-age students under the age of 21 are considered pediatric, and people come to the ER for all kinds of things like STIs and other sexual health concerns, and even here on campus we have lots of lovely resources available that are even free, and people aren't utilizing them. One thing about this research is that, as I mentioned, we collected the data for over 2 years, and we did this in a stepwise process where we see what type of overutilization exists, we implement educational interventions, and then we analyze that data to see what intervention is most effective. And one of the ones that we came up with is this traffic light. And this is actually available in all of our emergency departments and the MSU Healthcare pediatric clinics now. And we provide this directly at the discharge in the emergency department. This should be happening at your primary care level, but it's not, but that's okay, we'll get there. So the way that this works is that red is emergent, bones sticking out of your body, not breathing kind of emergencies. Urgent would be broken bones or high-grade fevers, and primary care is green, and that is everything in between. They can handle a lot. And we actually saw a 68% success rate in reducing those unnecessary visits with just the traffic light alone. So that is a wonderful improvement. That really shows to me as a researcher and as a provider that education can help in this problem. If we had that kind of overutilization drop in the state of Michigan, just for 1 year, we would be saving $370,000 in healthcare costs, not just for the healthcare providers, but also for the families. Because at the end of the day, that's who we're serving. And obviously, we'd also be saving a ton of staff hours, and we have such a staffing crisis in our emergency departments. And we would be saving over 1,800 hours monthly in overutilizing hours. So the big takeaways for this is really that as a community, we need to be investing in that patient education to prevent that ER overuse. This is not a topic that a lot of people know about, but it is so real in our community specifically. But that's not going to happen unless we also improve the access to those resources. We need to have primary care availability. We need to have telehealth. We need to have urgent cares, health department services. And these are all things that we have even here on campus. So the big thing that I really want you to take away is that education can solve this issue in overutilization for emergency services for pediatrics and also for other things. But it can save us millions, not just in hours, but also in costs, both for us as healthcare providers and for the families. So thank you.
Make noise for that researcher again. I don't come from the world of academics, but one thing I've learned working here is that people in academia, they love to save lives, and at the same time, they love to save money. So, thank you. Do what she said. All right, so your next performer or researcher coming to the stage is Abigail Lippert. So make it up. Make noise for Abigail. Come on.
I'm sure that everybody in this room has a connection to lakes. We live in the Great Lakes State, after all. My name is Abigail Lippert, and my research surrounds urban lakes, who lives near them, and how that affects their qualities and characteristics. So what is an urban lake? For our study, we took lakes that are in the conterminous U.S., which is the lower 48. They had to be greater than 1 hectare, which is a little bit bigger than a soccer field, and they had to be in an area with at least 150,000 people. And we can see from this map that there are about 480,000 lakes in the US, which is a lot, and about 63,000 of those lakes are urban, and we can see that a lot of those are in the East and in the Midwest. Urban lakes are really important because they provide us with a lot of essential ecosystem services, such as temperature control, habitat for plants and animals, and also food through fish and plants. They also provide us with a lot of recreational opportunities, such as boating or swimming. But even beyond that, being in and around a lake has been shown to have health benefits, such as decreasing your risk for cardiovascular issues, obesity, and cancer. However, since urban lakes are so close to humans, they experience a lot of pollution concerns, which can kill native wildlife and cause a lot of concerns for humans, such as toxic food, respiratory toxins, and bad odors. So my research falls under the umbrella of environmental justice, or rather injustice, and that's the idea that not everybody has equal access to natural resources and not everybody is equally protected from environmental hazards. So I look at the community surrounding the lake, and I look at the racial breakdown of that community to see if the racial breakdown affects the qualities and characteristics of the lake. So I want to stop here quickly and define a term that I will be using a lot during this presentation, which is people of color, or POC. And for this presentation, we're going to consider that to be any racial group other than white. So we take all of those lakes, all of those 65,000 lakes, and we determine whether they are POC lakes or white lakes, depending on a 25% cutoff, less than 20% 25% being a white lake, and greater being a POC lake. And we found that 57% of urban lakes are considered white lakes, and then 43 are considered POC lakes. And that means that POC are less likely to live near lakes. So we also looked at the perimeters of all of these lakes, and we found that white lakes are 22% larger by perimeter, which might not seem like a lot, but urban lakes are pretty small compared to normal lakes, so this can make a big difference. We also found that white lakes are 2 times more likely to have boat launches, which means that people of color are not experiencing the same recreational opportunities from urban lakes compared to white people. Another researcher in my lab found that white lakes are significantly more likely to be monitored for water quality, which is a really big issue, not only from a research perspective, but also because we might not have a good idea of the safety of lakes in POC communities. We found that white lakes are clearer than POC lakes, which is a measure of water quality, but also of aesthetic quality because people like clearer water more. And then we also found that lakes in POC communities are more likely to experience pollution, which contributes to those issues we talked about earlier, such as toxic food and respiratory toxins. So let's just wrap up everything that we found. We found that white lakes are bigger, they have better recreational opportunities, they're clearer, they're more likely to be monitored for water quality. And lakes in POC communities are more likely to be polluted. And this is an example of environmental injustice because people of color are not experiencing the same benefits from these urban lakes, and they may even be experiencing harms. And this is actually a public health issue because we talked a little bit earlier about how these being in and around these lakes have these physical health and mental health benefits, and people of color are not experiencing these in the same way as white people, which is a big issue. If you want to learn more about my research into urban lakes or the research of my lab into lakes in general, please feel free to check that out. And thank you so much for listening.
Please give a big round of applause to all of the researchers on the first half of the show. Are you ready to vote next Tuesday? Say yeah. We're not telling you who to vote for. We're just saying do the right thing. So the university is still open in 2026 and 27. So give it up and make noise until Stefanie Adams gets to the stage.
Hello everyone, my name is Stefanie Adams. I'm a 4th-year graduate student in physics, and in the next 5 minutes I'm hoping to convince you that it is possible to take a movie of an atom and also show you how this can be done. But first, to confirm the cliche of how nerdy we physicists are, I want to start out with a kind of bad science joke. You can't trust atoms, they make up everything. But how do we even know that everything consists of atoms when they are so tiny that we can't even see them with our own eyes? Usually, when we want to look at something small, we use a microscope. You might be familiar with these type of light microscopes where you place a small thing on the microscope table, illuminate it from the bottom, look through the eyepiece, and voila, you see a magnified image. And depending on the microscope, you might be able to change the magnification by swapping lenses, but there's an intrinsic limit to just how much you can zoom in with such a light microscope. This is what's called the diffraction limit. And to better understand this, I want you to imagine that you're trying to look at a small object on the other side of a fence. If the holes in the fence are very small, it becomes impossible to make out any details of that object on the other side. And in a similar way, light has a size called the wavelength, which determines how small of an object you can see underneath a microscope. And usually the resolution limit is about 10,000 times smaller than a millimeter. This means we can look at the powerhouse of a cell, but atoms are far below this limit. So we need a completely new method to make atoms visible to us. Louis Braille came up with a tactile writing system for visually impaired people, where raised dots represent the letters of the alphabet. And we want to use this as an inspiration to find a method to make atoms visible to us without using our eyes directly. In Braille, you scan your fingertip across the dots on the surface to make out the letters, put them together into words. If we view these dots as the atoms on a material surface, we need to replace the finger with a super, super sharp needle that can feel the atoms in a similar way. What does this look like in real life? This is our lab in the physics building here at MSU with this big machine with me for scale that hosts a super tiny needle over our material with a penny for scale to keep everything at very low temperatures and high vacuum. And this whole technique is called scanning tunneling microscopy, where the scanning we talked about is like the reading Braille, microscopy, zooming in. But what is tunneling? Let's take a step back and look at what an atom even is. Essentially, we have a nucleus in the center that is orbited by electrons, and if the nucleus was the size of a rice grain, then the whole atom would be roughly the size of Spartan Stadium. So now, if our needle is very, very close to a surface, the electrons of the atoms on the surface can randomly decide to jump into our needle. And the fancy quantum physics word for this process is tunneling. Now, as the needle scans across our material, if the needle is directly over an atom, more electrons will jump into the needle. And so jumping electrons we can measure as a current. And we can display this current as a picture where brighter areas represent areas where more electrons jumped or tunneled. And we can get these very pretty images of the atoms on our surface. This gets even more interesting if we combine different materials because we can study how they interact. Or we can zoom in onto a surface to look at locations where there are atoms missing. All of this is important to characterize the materials properly. So, great, we found a way to take images of atoms. But in reality, everything wiggles and jiggles. Sometimes we intentionally make it wiggle and jiggle. So we need to find a way to take our method from taking images to taking movies. So if something repeats a motion, such as a rotation or a vibration, we can take snapshots at different times of this motion and stitch them together to make a movie. And for the wiggles and jiggles of our atoms, we can do this in the same way by using a super fast laser pulse. Okay, so for my PhD, I'm looking at different materials trying to take movies. And here you can see the movie of a molecule, specifically how the electrons evolve after shining light on this molecule. You might wonder, why are we doing all of this? So the materials that we look at are promising candidates to improve applications such as electronic components, energy storage, and solar power. And the goal is to make these devices smaller, faster, and more efficient. So to sum everything up, we have this technique that works similar to Braille, where we scan a needle across a material to take images of atoms. We can use super fast laser pulses to turn them into movies, and we do all of this to find materials that can improve our devices, such as our smartphones. And all of this is only possible with the great support of my research group, so I would like to thank them. And I also want to thank all of you for being here tonight, and happy Halloween.
Make noise for that researcher again. And I do want to thank you all for coming back on the second half. And I say that again as a performer because I have a really supportive family, and they come to all the shows that I do. But after I perform, they all leave. So I said that to say, after your person goes, stay here, right? Or Abby will lock the doors. Abby won't lock the doors. It'll be me. Are you ready for your next researcher? Everybody, put your hands together for Manvir Bamrah.
Hi everyone, my name is Manvir. I am a fourth year here at Michigan State University, and today I'm presenting on my research, blue light, looking at sleep deprivation and its effects and how blue light may actually be helpful in remediating some of these cognitive deficits. Sleep is vital to cognitive performance, but sleep deprivation is inevitable. Staying up a little too late happens to everyone. But it's important that we have ways to avoid sleep deprivation, but also to remediate some of these negative effects, because these downstream effects can be catastrophic. The 1986 Challenger explosion, Exxon Valdez oil spill, American Airlines Flight 1420 have all been attributed to sleep deprivation. poor decision making, poor judgment, all contributing to these catastrophic accidents. But what does sleep deprivation actually impact? Placekeeping. Placekeeping is the ability to follow a task sequence without skipping or repeating any steps. Think cooking. Chopping up ingredients, heating up a pan, adding this all together. It requires remembering things in an order, in a sequence. Sleep deprivation also impacts vigilant attention, leading to attention decrements. Vigilant attention is the ability for sustained task attention over time and responses to changes in stimuli. Think driving, paying attention to the road, and adjusting for any traffic changes, any collisions that might occur. Blue light is traditionally seen as bad for sleep because it keeps you awake, which makes sense, but as it inhibits melatonin. But looking at this from another angle, blue light actually helps with attention, which is bad if you're trying to fall asleep, but if you're trying to stay awake, it could be helpful. This brings us to a research question. Does blue light exposure reduce cognitive deficits after sleep deprivation? We had a 2x2 design with half deprivation, half rested, and then half blue light on, half blue light off. Let's step into the shoes of our participant for a second. You arrive in the lab in the evening. They arrive at 9:45, complete unravel and PVT, which I'll get to in a second, but these are the evening tasks. Random drawing decides their condition, sleep or deprivation, 30 minutes of blue light in the morning, and then they complete these tasks again. But thinking about the blue light in the room, we want to control for this. So we have a couple lighting conditions. Amber lights, which control for this exogenous blue light blocking glasses throughout the night, and then of course the blue light exposure coupled with the amber light to kind of really control for all this light. First task is unravel, which is a placekeeping task. Participants apply a two-choice decision to a randomly generated stimulus. Unravel is actually an acronym, which each letter representing a different response option. Contextualizing this, let's look at stimulus 1. Here we see that the U is underlined, so the participant would click U. Moving on to N, is the U near or far from the alphabet? It's far, so they would pick F, and so on throughout the 7. But periodically, the participant gets interrupted. They have to type in a series of letters, and they have to correctly type this if they're going to move forward. And this is just like real life. When you're completing a task, it's inevitable you're going to get interrupted. So here we're looking at those post-interruption errors. Are they remembering where they left off? Are they picking up from where they were? Second task is PVT, which is the psychomotor vigilance task. It's a vigilant attention task, of course. A red dot appears, and they have to click it as fast as possible. And here we're measuring their reaction times and looking at their attentional lapses. When are they losing focus on that task? Let's bridge this all together. Participants arrive at night. They complete unravel and PVT. Here we're establishing their baseline. Then they conduct a random drawing and they're ascribed their sleep or deprivation cohort. The sleep group returns home to their habitual sleeping environment, but the deprivation group stays in the lab. Throughout the night, both groups are wearing blue light blocking glasses. Like I mentioned, we don't want any of this extra blue light impacting their performance, so these blue light blocking glasses block out all that exogenous blue light. Throughout the night, they're also completing some sleepiness and mood assessments just to see where they're at. In the morning, they undergo their 30 minutes of blue light exposure. Here we see me wearing those blue light glasses. That blue light is shining right in the back of your eye, and it really isn't affecting your vision, but after that 30 minutes, you're completing unravel and PVT again. Here we're looking at what's the result of that experimental condition. Interesting results here, but the first is that participants who've gone through a night of sleep deprivation show performance deficits. That's expected. Our sleep deprivation session worked. They were performing worse. It's a validation result, but important nonetheless. More interestingly, though, looking at blue light, it improved performance in the psychomotor vigilance task regardless of sleep or deprivation group, but had no significant effect in unravel. But what does this mean? Thinking about this, blue light had a selective effect in placekeeping and vigilant attention. It improved those basic attentional processes, but it didn't affect anything in placekeeping, similar to caffeine. Both of these improve attentional processes, but not those higher order processes. But this doesn't mean it's not important. 30 minutes of blue light exposure is an easy and efficient intervention to get that attention back. Attention is so important in cognition, and if it means being more focused, if it means getting a project finished or getting an A+, I think 30 minutes of blue light exposure is an easy way to accomplish it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Give it up again for that researcher. Abby, what's the thing that prevents you from sleeping at night?
My baby?
Okay. Give it up for babies keeping you up. Yeah. I think the same thing that keeps me up also makes me sleepy, which is like social media. I'm like, man, I'm up on Twitter at 3 a.m., but also this is exhausting me at the same time. It's like, So we need to talk after this, because like I got blue lights, black lights, green lights, and stop lights, and it works. Give it up for yourselves again. If you're ready for your next researcher, say yeah. If you're ready for your next researcher, say go green. Even though we got to figure out how to not lose again to those other people. Yes. But right now, make noise until Priyanka Kothari comes to the stage.
Hello, everybody. I'm Priyanka, and before I was here at MSU, I used to be a social studies teacher in India. I used to teach 700 students history. Yes, I knew everybody's name, and no, I did not dream that. So how did it work? Well, every day I used to teach 6 classes with 40 students, and then I changed my groups. But very quickly I realized that this time is very limited and precious. And more importantly, in that time, I had to convince my students that what I'm teaching is not a waste of time. Once upon a time, there was a king. So what, right? How does it matter today? I told them, history is the greatest story of humanity, everything that has ever happened, and I can't teach you all. I don't know it all. So we pick snapshots, and then we teach you, and kings and battles are a part of it. Now in India, the school boards prescribe as textbooks, and the lessons in the textbooks are those snapshots. Considering my limited time, and the even more limited interest of my students, I began paying attention to what those snaps were. What are we teaching the kids? Because depending on what the snaps are, the whole story can change. Let's consider the case of Ashoka. He's a famous ancient Indian emperor who ruled in the 3rd century BCE, a long, long time ago. And he is the protagonist of a very famous folktale today. The story goes that 8 years after he became the king, he waged a war against the kingdom of Kalinga. It was a great destructive war which he won, but 100,000 people died and 150,000 people were captured. At the end of the war, he took a walk on the battlefield, and looking at the piles of dead bodies everywhere, he was so remorseful that he decided to renounce war and embrace the peace-loving religion of Buddhism. Such a wonderful story, isn't it? I remember as a child thinking about it, that that's the kind of person I wanted to be. Somebody with such a great high ethics and morals. Ashoka became the embodiment of an ideal way of life for me. But today, I think about it differently. Think about it. How many kings do you know in history who have renounced war? Also, think about the fact that at the end of the Kalinga War, he was the ruler of already like a vast empire. Just the southern kingdoms remained, and he tried to subjugate them earlier, but then he failed. Perhaps a friendlier existence with them was more beneficial to him. Now, forgive my skepticism, but it's easy to renounce war when everything has been conquered. Don't you think so? But for the children, it doesn't matter. Ashoka is the man, he's the hero who gave up war. Now, in our increasingly polarized, politicized world, we must consider the stories we tell our children. Who are they? And what are we telling them? Because we could be victims or heroes or bystanders. In the 6th grade history textbooks, 11 lessons relate to general topics of history and 1 on Ashoka. No other king throughout the 10th grade has been allotted this special treatment. So must we not consider, as my kids tell me, that he is the dude? While in the long civilizational history of India, how important is Ashoka? I mean, that's a great story and something we should all strive for and celebrate. But is it really true? Historical evidence tells us that Ashoka was a brutal ruler. Kalinga was not his first war. And I mean, at any rate, you shouldn't need to kill 1 million people to know that killing is wrong. Something must have happened once in between. How did it change? The lesson always segues then to his love for Buddhism and how he embraced Buddhism after that. How does that fact change when we know, if we know, that Ashoka was already a Buddhist before the war, as some historians have recently claimed? Well, these are big questions that I cannot tell you in 5-minute talk. So I welcome you to my dissertation defense in 2028. It's just around the corner, I promise. But today, I will leave you with this. When it comes to history education, as in life, the stories we tell matter. History education is a continuous dialogue between what the historians have uncovered at this point of time and what is most useful to the children. Who are the stories? Who are the people whose stories we're telling them? It will never have a perfect snapshot of history, but still, once upon a time, there lived a king, they fought battles and they died. But they're still relevant to us today because they live in our collective memories. They inspire us, push us, sometimes even scare us. But most importantly, they shape who we are today. Once upon a time, there was a king, and today we continue their legacy. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Give it up for that researcher again. I really think that most of y'all should have like a calm app station where you just tell stories at night. November 4th, I'm going to tell a story to my kid, which is if you don't go to sleep early, you're going to wake up to a new king tomorrow. And you might not like it, whoever it is, gender neutral. Give it up for these researchers again. And make noise as Yunting Gu gets to the stage. Put your hands together, don't lose energy. It's only 8 o'clock.
I'll give you a countdown, okay?
Hi everyone, my name is Yunting Gu. I study one human ability or behavior, which is what I'm doing right now, speaking. Today, I'm going to talk about how do we speak our language. We speak our language using our mouth. If we say, great ignite talk, out loud, our lip, tongue are moving during the process. But just using our mouth is not enough for us to speak. If we only have a set of moving lips and tongue, words cannot be produced because we lack proper airflow from our lungs. Our throat serves as a pathway for airflow from our lungs to reach inside our mouth. We need special tools to measure tongue and lip movement. A person would sit with this white box around their head, and they would talk with these tiny attachments stick to their tongue and lip. Don't worry, we use edible glue. This white box generating an electromagnetic field is a backdrop for the tongue movement tracking system. Within the field or backdrop, the movement of tiny attachments on tongue or lip will be tracked. Use a system, we can know how we say a syllable. In me, we use our lip to say the M sound and our tongue to say the E sound. So knowing the time point of tongue and lip can tell us whether two sounds in a syllable are produced together with a lot of overlap or produced in a sequence with little overlap. And analyze thousands of observations. So how two sounds in a syllable are produced? I found that in a syllable we produce one sound after another with some overlap in between. And this is not limited to English. But how do we begin to speak English or other languages? We learn our languages. From school, we learn the details of our first language or mother tongue, and we learn everything about the foreign language we speak. We are able to learn languages because we as humans are born with the ability to speak. When we were infants, we unconsciously learn our first language very efficiently. When we are no longer infants, learning a language becomes much more difficult. A very advanced foreign language learner will lack the intuition about English that any 5-year-old English speaker may have. Indeed, languages are different from each other, and the difference creates so much difficulty for language learners. Yet, languages of the world also share some commonalities, even though there are thousands of languages coming from more than 100 language families. Regarding the syllable structure, at syllable beginning, PL or GR are much more frequent than syllable beginning with PT or GB, which is much more frequent than syllable beginning with LP or RG. Also, in the world's languages, syllables beginning with a consonant and ends in a vowel are much more frequent than syllable beginning with a vowel and ends in a consonant. But why are there such similarities among different languages? One potential reason is that humans prefer less overlapping sounds. So one sound produced after another with little overlap is preferred over producing two sounds at the same time. But why is that? One potential reason is that our hearing system prefers this less overlapping organization of sounds. Our ability to hear shapes how we speak our languages. People who are deaf or hard to hear may often never be able to speak, since never heard speech sound, but they can still communicate using their hand, their sign language. People who talk using their mouths may also use their body language to express their idea or emotions. But the same body language may be interpreted differently for people from different culture or background. Even for people from the same background, we talk differently from each other. The difference may be subtle or unnoticeable, but our voice is part of our identity and persona. We may not consciously do so, but we speak with our emotion, with our awareness of our culture and audience. Thoroughly answering the question, how do we speak, is not easy. Computer systems or animals may produce some language-like product, but so far, only humans can speak our language with our human brain. Thank you.
Make more noise for that researcher. So we are on our last researcher of the evening. Everybody say last one. But it is the first of many, because I'm pretty sure we'll be doing Ignite number 4. Give it up for Abby for putting 3 of these together. I know you don't like the attention, but you did it. Yeah, so we're very excited that you all are here, and we'll introduce you to some of our staff afterwards if there are things you want to connect and collaborate with us on. But in the meantime, everybody give a big round of applause to Ampaiwan.
Hello, everyone. Will you believe me when I tell you that cats are taking over the world? No? Yes? Well, I will be with the yes team. Let me tell you this. There are approximately 800 million cats around the world. Cats reproduce at an alarming rate when unfixed. In fact, in only 8 years, one unspayed female can be responsible for up to 2 million offspring. Over half of these cats live outdoors as community cats, which tend to include a larger population of unfixed cats. But what is community cat? Why we call them that? So community cat includes those that are stray cat, which are pet cat that were lost or abandoned but could be rehomed. These cats tend to be comfortable interacting with people. Community cat can also be feral cat, which are cat born and raised outdoors. They might show aggressive or fearful behavior when interacting with people, so they're not a good candidate for rehomings. Despite living outdoors, these cats are cared for by a dedicated caregiver who provides food, water, and shelter, and we call this group of people caretaker or caregiver in the States. Previous study investigated the stakeholder demographic, and we found that 2,000 participants report that they're feeding almost 2,000 cats. So what does this number tell us? A lot of cats, yes. A lot of people, yes. Well, this study indicates that there are a huge group of people that are actively caring for community cats. But why does community cat is still overpopulations? One reason may be that the cats are cared for, but they're not always got spay or neuter. So the researcher introduced TNR, which stands for Trap, Neuter, Return Program, which is currently being used in many areas to control cat population. First, we trap the cat, get them spay and neuter, vaccinated, and ear tip, which is a universal sign that indicates that cat got spay and neuter. And then we return them to their outdoor homes. To better control cat population, we recommend to use Target TNR, which is a program that you trapping all the cat in specific area and then expanding to nearly colonies. But then many people have a question. Do they have a good life living outdoor? What if they live in the crowded shelter? Do they have a better life there, healthier or safer? Well, in scientific world, when we looking at animal well-being, we're looking at their animal welfare. So animal welfare refers to the physical and mental state of animal which related to their life or dies. Animal welfare includes 5 domains, which is nutrition, environment, health, behavior, and mental states. As far as we know, only one study from New Zealand study health-related welfare, which looking at their community cat welfare. However, they only looking at their health. Other assessment for pet cat or shelter cat is access as well, but they're only mainly focusing on help, which leading to our project that we want to have a practical and valuable assessment for community cat welfare to access their welfare and be able to use by public and professional. However, in order to achieve this goal, we first need to collect information on the perceptions of welfare for community cats among feline stakeholders and the tool that they might currently being used but unpublished. So what did we do for this study? We sent our open-ended survey online to expert panel to investigate their perceptions. In this study, we target people such as veterinarian, shelter staff, caretaker, or people who involved in community cat care. We asked them to describe good or poor welfare indicator, and we asked whether they use any tools or assessment or measurement that they currently use to access the cat in their areas. For the result, we received 596 responses, and we found that the respondent mentioned 5 welfare indicators, including human support, resources, health condition, natural behavior, cat population management. The first key point that we found is human support, including supportive community, education, and the presence of caretaker. Resources include shelter, area conditions, safety, weather, food, and water conditions. Health condition include access to vet care and good health in general. Natural behavior indicate that the cat should be able to perform their natural behavior such as socialization or hunting. Cat population management includes TNR, by law or state law, and in summary, most respondents did not have a written assessment, and these findings in our study suggest that we need to have a practical assessment to not just access community cat welfare, but to track their status and what can we do to help community cats and neighborhood. Well, first, you can monitor your neighborhood for new cat, and if they not have an ear tipping, they need to get spay and neuter. Otherwise, the cat will take over your neighborhood. Thank you.
Awesome job. Thank you.
Make noise for that researcher as well. And that concludes the evening with our researchers, so give it up again for yourselves.